Alex, people look at a workbench like this and they see a piece of furniture. They're wrong. It's not furniture, it's the floor, just raised up to where your back doesn't scream at you by lunchtime.
It's a very fancy floor, Tiger. I've seen you treat your dining room table with less respect than this slab of maple. But for someone just starting out, someone who's currently using a plastic folding table or a pair of rickety sawhorses, the idea of building the bench is paralyzing. Where do you even start?
You start by admitting that your first bench won't be your last. I remember my first one. I built it out of some soggy construction studs I found behind a job site dumpster. I thought I was being clever, until the wood dried out and the top warped so badly it looked like a Pringles chip. I spent 3 months trying to plane a door flat on a surface that was basically a mountain range.
So, step one, don't raid the dumpsters. Got it. But seriously, the design decisions are what kill people. Mark Dunning says size is the first hurdle. He went with 2 meters, about 6.5 feet. Is bigger always better, or is that just shop machismo?
It's tempting to build a deck in your garage and call it a bench, but you have to be honest about your zip code. If you're working in a spare bedroom, a 6-foot bench is a barricade, not a tool. Paul Sellers always talks about the creative workspace. You build to fit the room you have, not the room you wish you had. But if you've got the floor space, go big. A long bench lets you park a project at one end and still have room to sharpen a chisel at the other without moving a mountain of clutter.
Okay, so size is dictated by the room. What about height? I've seen the rule of thumb where you stand with your arms at your sides and the bench should hit your wrist. Paul Sellers says he likes 38 inches, but his buddy who's 6'4" wants 40. That's a tiny margin for a huge difference in comfort.
That wrist joint rule is a decent starting line, but it's not gospel. If you're doing heavy hand planing, you want it a hair lower so you can get your body weight over the tool. If you're doing fine joinery or electronics, you want it higher so you aren't hunched over like a gargoyle. My advice, build the legs long. It's a whole lot easier to saw 2 inches off the bottom of a leg than it is to grow them back once you realize you're getting a permanent crick in your neck.
The gargoyle method of woodworking. I'll pass. Let's talk materials. We see these dream benches made of North American hard maple or European beech that cost as much as a used car. But then Sellers is over here pitching whitewood and spruce from the big box home improvement stores. Is Douglas fir actually a viable option, or is that just for people who like splinters?
Look, hardwood is lovely. It's heavy, it's stable, it's sexy. But for a first build, spruce fir or southern yellow pine are your best friends. They're cheap enough that when you accidentally drill a hole right through your tabletop, and you will, you won't feel like you've stabbed a family heirloom. The trick is the laminations.
Laminations? You mean gluing the boards together like a giant butcher block?
Exactly. You're taking those 2x4s, ripping the rounded edges off so they're square, and gluing them face to face. That's where the magic happens. You're aiming for a top that's at least 3 inches thick. When you have 3 inches of solid wood under your hammer, the energy goes into the chisel, not into the bench bouncing off the floor. It should feel like you're working on top of an anvil.
I've heard people complain that pine is too soft, though, that if you drop a tool, it leaves a dent.
That's the secret, Alex. I'd rather the bench take the dent than my hand-ground plane blade. A soft bench is a sacrificial lamb. It's grippy, it's forgiving, and every few years you just run a plane over the top to freshen it up. It's like a reset button for your workshop.
Speaking of grippy, we have to talk about work holding. I looked at Mark Dunning's design. He's got twin screw vices and more holes than a Swiss cheese. For a beginner, do you really need a $400 vise right out of the gate?
Vice are the heart of the thing, but they're also the biggest rabbit hole. You can get by with a decent iron quick-release vise on the front, but the real game changer is the dog holes. Just 3/4-inch holes drilled into the top. You put a wooden peg in there, and suddenly you have a stop block for your wood. It's the cheapest, most effective upgrade you'll ever make.
What about the base? I've seen benches that look beautiful on top, but the legs look like they're doing a dance whenever someone starts sawing.
Oh, the Bambi on ice effect. If your bench wobbles, you'll hate woodworking within 20 minutes. The joinery in the base has to be beefy. I like a deep mortise and tenon. You want those legs to feel like they're rooted in the foundation of the house. I once built a bench with just carriage bolts holding the legs on. Thought I was being modular. Every time I used a handsaw, the whole thing would migrate 3 inches to the left. By the time I finished a birdhouse, the bench was in the driveway.
So, heavy, thick, and rooted. If we're wrapping this up for the person standing in the lumber aisle right now, Looking at a stack of spruce and feeling intimidated, what's the one pivot point, the one decision that makes it a real bench?
It's the weight. Forget the fancy hardware, forget the expensive wood species. If you make it heavy enough to stay still and thick enough to take a beating, you've won. Everything else, the vices, the drawers, the dog holes, that can evolve. Your workbench is a living thing. It should grow with your skills. Don't wait until you're a master to build the master's bench. Build the bench that makes you a master.
I like that, a foundation you can actually build your life on.
Exactly. Now, pass me that mallet. I think I see a spot on this fancy floor that needs a bit more character.